All right, good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I had a little hiccup in my schedule yesterday. All week, I have been thinking I was actually a whole day ahead of what it really was. So, absolutely losing my mind. And so, this topic today is very timely. One, because I'm experiencing it. I'll bet you lots of you are too. And I wanted to share with you some of the information that I have found and uncovered. Some of it is through the research that I've been doing for my book, which I mentioned comes out in November, which is Health is Not a Mystery. It's about really my experience with gut health and the current medical world, the medical system, our broken medical health and medical system, which I talked about today with Erica Smith on our podcast. If you've not heard that yet, I think there's a link in the story, but it's called the Trust Your Gut podcast. And today we talked about that, about really how our medical system is broken. It's not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system, and it really is, for the most part, not helping people with chronic illness. And a lot of those chronic illnesses are related to what we're talking about today, which is stress and gut health, and they're very strongly tied together. And one of the things that I see a lot with people that are coming to me for health coaching, oftentimes it's weight loss, but a lot of times they have health conditions and they don't realize the connection to stress. But one of the things, I have lots of people that they do all the right things, they're eating, perfect, they're doing all the suggestions that I give them, they're, exercising, and they're, mindful of their lifestyle, but they are not really aware of their levels of stress and how much it's impacting them and their ability to lose weight. So what I wanted to talk about is specifically about stress, is how that it affects your metabolism. And I think that this is an area that's hugely under talked about and underestimated, because so many people are in that situation like this one I described, where you're eating all the right things, you're exercising, and somehow you're still stuck. And this is where we talk with people that are really stuck on the calories in, calories out, that's kind of the only thing that matters with metabolism. That is really just kind of an ignorant way of looking at it, because there's so many other factors that are involved with your metabolism and your health. And most of those are hormones. And that's a lot of how stress is going to impact your health. So I've got a lot of notes that I'm going to share with you today. And if you haven't yet signed up for my newsletter, I send out a newsletter on all of this information with the links, with the studies, everything, so you can read through it yourself. I don't want you to just take my word for it. I always want you to do your own research. So if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, you just go to my website and you can sign up for that. And this will come out on Saturday. But to make it short and sweet, we're going to try to stick with about 20 minutes today. And by the way, this is a Instagram Live with badges, which means you can make a donation by buying a badge if you like to support my work. That is super cool, and I always appreciate that. And I really welcome your comments and questions, even if it's not agreeing with me. I'm here to share information, not tell you what to do. That ultimately is going to be your choice to make. But, all right, so the bottom line is the reason why people have really difficulties with their metabolism has its roots in stress, because your hormone is really, your metabolism is really based on hormones. And what I mean by that is, when we look at metabolism, what do you think? You can type it in the chat. Like, when the word metabolism, what does that mean to you? And for most people, it's going to mean how much calories do I burn? So that is in part what we're talking about. So yes, you have your basal metabolic rate, but your metabolism is much bigger than that. And so if we look at how many calories you burn in a day, right? Your biggest portion of that is your muscle mass and your activity that you do throughout the day, not necessarily working out, right? And so that kind of determines your caloric burn. So yes, the more muscle mass you have, those things that we already know, those are going to hugely affect your metabolism. But we also have things that slow your metabolism, and this is where the hormones come into play. So everything kind of goes back to the gut and the thyroid. So first thing, we automatically assume that the thyroid is the controller of everything, which in a lot of times it is, but there's something even bigger that affects the thyroid, and that is the state of your gut and digestive system. So let me explain more why that is. First of all, when we look at your thyroid, most people make enough thyroid hormone, right? We make T4, but our body uses T3. So what happens is we make that T4, and I've already talked about this in others, but I'll just review it for anybody who hasn't heard it or you're new to this concept. Your metabolism is so hugely affected by your thyroid because of the thyroid hormone, right? So yes, you've got the skeletal muscle, how much you exercise, how much you move in a day, but your thyroid hormone is creating T3 and T4. It's mostly T4. And after it creates T4, it's going to either send that into free T3 or reverse T3. And if you remember from last time's live, we talked about what can damage the ability of your body, the body's ability to burn fat, which is basically T3 functions, is stress. And the reason is because that conversion from T4 to T3 is hugely affected by stress. Let me explain more how. So if you imagine we get all this T4, but that's not really going to help us with weight loss or our metabolism so much. And we need that free T3. But every stress hormone actually helps to push things to that reverse T3. So one of the main ones being cortisol. The more cortisol and adrenaline or epinephrine we have in our body, the more that conversion happens from T4 to reverse T3. Not what we want. We want our free T3 to be the one that's shining, right? Because that's doing most of the work for us. But when we have a lot of stress, we're doing more and more conversion from T4 to reverse T3. Cortisol, epinephrine being the big ones. And we'll talk a bit about how those are all developed in a second. But the other one is estrogen. Estrogen is a major stress hormone that actually also interferes with the conversion of T4 to T3. And so both of these have in common the one big factor, which is your gut and your digestive system. So in the case of having problems converting that T4 to T3, if we look at that as like the secret weapon to your metabolism, your T3 you cannot make that conversion if you have gut inflammation or maybe damaged liver, because a lot of that conversion happens in the liver and in the gut. Also, you are having a lot of trouble getting rid of estrogens in your body because you do that through your liver and through your gut. And if you have high estrogen, it's going to create more reverse T3. Most efficient way to lower cortisol. Ray of sunshine, you just want to cut to the chase. Let's do it. Yes, so I'll tell you, the secret weapon to lowering cortisol is another hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is kind of the antidote to cortisol. You get that from, guess how you get that. Hey, Erica, Keeping It Real Coach is my podcast partner. She's on with us today. Yeah, you get oxytocin through laughing, having fun, playing, relaxing, enjoying activities, playing with your pets, your kids, your lover, your family and friends, just doing things that make you feel good, release oxytocin. We think of it as the love or sex hormone, which is true. Yes, cuddling, those kind of things, those raise oxytocin. So when you're feeling stressed, and this is just one way we get our stress hormones, right, is feeling emotional stress, our perceived stress. We can kind of downgrade that by snuggling, cuddling, pet your dog, whatever, like those kind of the love hormone. That's what we're looking for. And then yes, it does work. It opposes it as much as like testosterone does. So that's one way to bring down the stress, the cortisol. I'll talk about more in a second, Ray of Sunshine, but let's talk about other sources of stress. So now you have the picture of how does the stress affect your metabolism. It's because it encourages estrogen dominance, which slows thyroid function along with cortisol by changing more T4 into reverse T3 instead of T3. So how do you know if you have this problem? There is a way to check. And I've mentioned this before also, you can check, besides the fact that you might find yourself gaining weight and having other symptoms, low energy, low libido, low mood, things like that. There are other ways to check. You can do labs, and you can check your lab work to find out if your reverse T3 is high. And that can be one reason is the stress. Stress hormones are high, reverse T3 will show up, and my notes just disappeared. So that's one of the big reasons is your stress hormones will be high, and you'll see it on your lab work as high cortisol and high reverse T3. The other way to check is you can also see on your labs, your estrogen and testosterone would be low. So the blood work is one way. The other way would be just to simply check your temperature. When thyroid function is low, your T3 levels are low, your body temperature is going to be low. So I was just talking this morning to one of my other clients about this because it's inconvenient to get the lab work done and whatever. And I get it, right? We're all busy and some of these things are a pain in the neck, but you don't have to do that. And some people don't have access to healthcare or someone that will help them with these things. There are some online testing that I have found recently, like Let's Get Checked. They can do all sorts of different blood work in labs, including the free T3, T4, and TSH test. I think it's like $100. There's a downside to that, which is that you can't get help, with thyroid medicine. But anyway, that's another can of worms. But you can get your labs done on your own if you don't have a medical provider or don't have insurance. Okay, then the other way, so I mentioned the body temperature. This is really the best way, in my opinion, because anybody can do it. You're just going to take your little thermometer. Mine is not nearby, or I'd show you. I always recommend under the armpit. That's what Broda Barnes recommends in his books, and he's kind of the master of where this all came from, so I trust him. But you can check through your mouth, the forehead. The problem is that those areas aren't as reliable because they are volatile in the numbers. Whereas we don't typically walk around with our arms up, right? So we have, the armpit kind of stays the same. And anyway, so that's a typical place to measure. And what you're looking for is that when you wake up in the morning, that your temperature is 97.6 or higher. And then after you've eaten, because your metabolism is now working, your body should be warmer. You should be getting a 98.6. or warmer. So I don't know if anybody in here has checked their temperatures. I'd love to hear your numbers if you're willing to put them in there. But it's not uncommon to see 95, 96. Thank you for the badge, Sunglass Jesus. So nice. Appreciate the badges, guys. So when you take your temperature in the morning, you should write it down because you want to see it trending up over time. So you're doing these different things to help with your stress level. You want to see that it's affecting your metabolism. It's not going to happen overnight, I'll tell you that. It's going to take some time to work on, and you may need some assistance above and beyond this. But I'll tell you that your stress hormones are a direct effect onto your metabolism through your thyroid. So, wow, I love the hearts. All right, let's switch gears, and I'm going to talk about another way besides your thyroid that this could be, your stress can be giving you troubles. I think that first of all, we need to establish what is the stress. For a lot of people, it's the perceived stress. Like right now, I'm under a lot of stress. I'm feeling it. We have a shitty environment that we're dealing with, some more than others. Maybe under a lot of pressure from your job, from the environment, from home. These are your emotional stressors, right? And it's really how you perceive it. So it might be minor to somebody else, but if you perceive you're having a serious stressful situation, then you are having a serious stressful situation, and it is going to increase your stress hormones, which do the things that I just described to your thyroid. But also they cause inflammation in general. And when your stress hormones are up for whatever reason, whether it's stress or the other ones I'll mention here in a moment, meaning perceived stress, then your body actually dips into your glucose levels by through your liver, and if there's not enough there, then into your muscle, and that's where we get into that gluconeogenesis. So your body knows how to oppose stress with glucose. And that's why a lot of people, when they get into the low carb diets, their stress hormones go even higher. And I think some people can do better than others on low carb or keto or carnivore because maybe their stress levels are more managed than others. What I have seen from the hundreds of people that I've talked to is that the more stress they have in their life, the more carbohydrates they need. And when they try to go down to too low of carbs, they feel physically stressed. They get anxiety, they get insomnia. And then you can see this stuff on blood work with the testosterone levels dropping, like I mentioned before, and the cortisol, the stress hormones rising. And then you can also see it as their body temperatures drop. So when you're under stress, your body will catabolize itself to make that glucose to lower the stress hormones. But guess what happens in the process? Blood glucose rises. So you can be eating no carbohydrate whatsoever. And I know that some of you have experienced this because I did on carnivore, and I had a lot of other people that did as well that I talked to. You're like, why is my blood glucose going up when I'm eating zero sugar and zero carbohydrates? This is why. It's because when there's stress hormone is elevated, your body goes into gluconeogenesis, will create that glucose, and it's released into the bloodstream. So your blood glucose actually is elevated due to stress. And believe it or not, this is a driver for diabetes. If you're constantly under chronic stress, your HbA1c can be really high, even if you're not eating any carbohydrates at all. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I did see that happen. I was at 5.7 on carnivore, and after a month of adding my carbs, it dropped to 5.4. So is that because I was having less carbs? No, it was because I had less stress in my body and probably less glucose floating around my system and instead being used. So you got to take into consideration how much stress you're under and how much your body's going to need. So this is where the whole one size fits all just doesn't work. You're not going to be able to, everyone isn't going to be able to do the same thing. And I am going to poo-poo here on the zero carb for a second because everybody needs carbs for their brain function. Even if you're a lazy person and you just sit on the couch all day, your brain is still going. And so your brain needs glucose, and in order to make that, it's going to make it from your tissues. It's going to go through gluconeogenesis, which raises cortisol, which inflames your gut, which slows the thyroid function, and will raise your blood glucose. So your blood sugar is going to go up. So it's like this thing, we think we're tricking our body by not having carbs, but your body's way too smart and will make carbs anyway. So that's why I think carnivore has a place. Zero carb, in my opinion, is way too stressful on the body. And even if you were to add some milk and honey, I think would be a huge step up from the zero carb lifestyle. So you have to take in consideration what's happening to your gut, what's happening to your hormones. All of these things are going to mess with your metabolism. And if you don't fix it, you're going to have to fix it later on, and it's going to take more time and more effort. And what I mean by that is once you're estrogen dominant, it's a vicious cycle because your metabolism slows down, you gain body fat. Body fat creates more estrogen. It's a metabolic, it's a hormone, your body fat. So it's actually creating more estrogen and then making it even harder to lose weight because at the same time, thyroid hormone drops. It's a nasty cycle that you don't want to be in. And once you're there, it's tough to get out. So if you think about what are the different stressors, we think of emotional stress. Like right now I feel stressed, but it's because of what's happening in my life. It's not because of other things, but I'm going to mention a couple other in a second. Erica says CGMs are a great way to figure out how much, which, and when to eat carbohydrates. I agree. I love the CGM. I wore it for 2 weeks and it was very enlightening. Everyone should give it a go for a couple weeks. But yeah, I think you'd be amazed at what happens in your blood sugar even when you're not eating carbs. It'll go, spiking at some point because your body's doing its job. So let's just look at other sources of stress that you can negate by putting in a little bit of effort. And thank you, Natalie, for another badge. So much awesomeness from you guys. Appreciate it. So what can we do? Well, obviously the emotional stress, the physical stress is going to be different, but the emotional stress, how you perceive your life, your relationships, your work, your surroundings, are you doing too much? Think of where the stress lies here and what can you do? For me, I have to go through my head and think about the things that are stressful and kind of check them off the list. Is there anything I can do about this one thing that's stressing me? Yes or no? If the answer is no, I have to set it aside. If the answer is yes, then I'm going to start to figure out what can I do about that. Also, just offloading things. Are you too busy? I had a client the other day that said she didn't have time to have a snack during the day. You're way too busy if you can't even get a break in to eat, to feed yourself. So really putting in realistic terms, your life, how busy are you? Maybe you need to mitigate some of these things that are happening in your day-to-day and be realistic about your abilities. Then there's physical stress. So in the physical body, we are easily stressed out. If you've ever had an injury and you feel like you're getting, some sore muscles, it gets stiff and achy, well, that is inflammation, and your body's stress hormones will go up when there's an injury. You might see some of that inflammation, or it might last longer than, one day. But ultimately, there's stress involved there and stress hormones. And that's just kind of the body's natural mechanisms. But physical stress, even just working out too much, can be a big stressor for people. So this isn't to say that you shouldn't work out. It's, are you working out too hard for your body? And if you're someone who's got really high stress hormones, you probably shouldn't be doing a ton of cardio, because even though that may in your mind sound like a good idea for weight loss, it could be raising your cortisol and your stress hormones, which creates that whole problematic system that we've been talking about. Breathing techniques to activate the parasympathetic system. Even if stress is present, your body won't physically perceive the stress. So breathing, I love that we have so many tools in our toolbox. And maybe instead of doing all the cardio, you should do some of these stress reduction activities. And think about, when you go on vacation, do you find that you lose weight? Because a lot of people do. And it's not because they're working out more, it's because they're relaxing and they're enjoying, and the stress hormones are probably dropping. So yes, we need to exercise, doing the deep breathing. Actually, one of my awesome clients this morning said to me, she was reading a book called Breath, and I had told her about the breathing for the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So she went out and got this book. I don't know if anybody's heard of that one, but I hadn't heard of it. And I'm going to get that and read it. But how much power is there in our own ability to breathe? If we know that stress is a big driver of illness for us, not just metabolism, but all these other diseases that we deal with, stress is a major root cause for chronic disease. If we know that, and we know also that we can manage the stress through our minds, through our thoughts, through increasing oxytocin, through increasing our breathing activities, and reducing our time spent in the stress state or the sympathetic state, and try to put ourselves more in the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest state. We have so many tools, but yet if you go to the doctor and tell them you're having anxiety, they're going to give you a prescription for SSRI probably. And so this is where we're at. We don't really look at what we have right in our own repertoire of tools to keep ourselves healthy. And anyway, we talked all about that this morning in our podcast. If you should take a listen to it if you want to hear more about our jacked up medical system. But anyway, we want to look at the physical body, the mental, but also look at the toxins that your body's exposed to. And I want to say toxins, but the broader word would be like your environment. So yeah, obviously toxins in our food, we know we need to read labels and watch out for things that would irritate the body, stuff that comes through our water supply. Did you guys know that your municipal water supply that creates your tap water actually recycles toilet water? And when people take medications, they pee into the toilet and the water system does not filter it out. It doesn't have the capability. So there's literally prescription drug residue in your tap water. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can go to the environmental working group and look up your zip code, and it'll tell you what kind of toxins are actually in your water. I know I learned that many years ago, and it blew me away that actually, like somebody could be taking their drugs, their prescription medications, and it actually ends up in your tap water. So I have a Berkey. I always recommend a Berkey. Filter out all your water, especially the fluoride and the arsenic that's in your tap water, because those are stressors on your system, toxins of all sorts. So your food, your water, but also your skin. A lot of people, go and look in your bathroom. What do you have in your cabinets? Do they have chemicals in them? I'll bet they do. If you go into like CVS or Walgreens and buy your toiletries in there, guaranteed they're going to be full of toxic ingredients. And you can also look those up on Environmental Working Group. There's a database called Skin Deep. So you go to EWG, environmentalworkinggroup.org, and then search Skin Deep, and you can put your actual product in there, and it'll tell you a rating on how toxic it is. Because most products have carcinogenic toxins, things that will cause inflammation in your gut, endocrine disruptors, you name it. So food, water, skin, and then also to consider, this is a big one, is our EMFs. So I go to bed at night and I flip one switch and it turns off all the EMFs in my house. But if you think about it, most people are bombarded by EMFs every single day. And they're shown to be very dangerous to your body, carcinogenic, and definitely inflammatory. But if that is causing elevated cortisol, then you can bet it's going to affect your metabolism. And we just don't think of that, right? Because it's invisible. Like I'm looking at the phone right now. I'm using my Wi-Fi because so I can get good reception. And that's what we all do. We read on our Kindles. We're looking at our computers. We're working. All of that day in, day out. And even if you're at night sleeping with Wi-Fi bombarding your body, that's another toxin, environmental toxin that you need to be aware of. So I highly recommend to step away from your devices as often as you can. Turn your Wi-Fi off at night when you go to bed, and just anything you can. One last mention is darkness. So darkness is a major stressor on your body. So if you're someone that's not sleeping well and you're up during the night, that being awake in the dark, we're meant to sleep in the dark. So when we're awake, it's stressful. There's been lots of evidence to support the stress hormones are actually elevated if you're awake at night, like nighttime workers. And so if you're someone that falls into that category, something you might want to consider is giving yourself red light towards the end of the day to kind of help your body to recognize the circadian rhythms, because that nighttime darkness is very stressful, and the light that we typically see is the blue light. So if you're at night turning on your devices, again, you're seeing that blue light. It kind of tricks your brain and just adds more stress. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. Thanks so much for all your comments and interaction. I love it. And I will try to get my dates right next time. I usually come on Wednesdays, but this week I was really thrown for a loop. And glad you like to hear about stress, because we're all living through it. And I want to make sure you guys are doing what you can to stay healthy and not let the stress get to you too much. 16-year-old, why do I keep waking up at 5 a.m.? I don't know. There's lots of reasons why you can wake up too early. Maybe you're going to bed too early. Maybe there's you have to wake up to go pee. You could be having, sometimes low progesterone does that, and oftentimes sleep is disturbed by cortisol. So I would look at your stress levels and all the things that we talked about today as to reasons that your stress levels could be higher than they should be and what you can do to mitigate it. So if you're just coming in, quick recap, what you can do to reduce your stress that affects your metabolism is be around loved ones, have friends, snuggle, kiss, love on your people, your animals, just get out and have more fun to raise your oxytocin levels. Getting outdoors in general will probably help that too. Turning off your Wi-Fi, filtering your water, eliminating the toxins at every opportunity that you can. Eating frequently, keeping your blood sugar balanced. When your blood sugar goes too low, it will send you into gluconeogenesis to get your blood sugar up, and that's very stressful on the body, which will raise your blood glucose anyway, so it's really no point in cutting all those sugars out of your diet. So there's lots of ways to mitigate your stress. I hope you use some of those tools. And the last comment is sign up for my newsletter. I will have all of this coming out on Saturday with a little bit more details as to like how you can handle it and ways to mitigate the stress. Whew, I've been talking a long time, so I'm going to sign off now. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you guys next Wednesday for another IG Live. Send me your comments on what you'd like to talk about next week, and we'll come up with a nice, good talk for you. All right, we'll see you then.